And I will pass it to MARIAELENA, who's going to share about their experience.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steve, for sharing, and everyone else who has already spoken. As I mentioned, my name is MARIAELENA. I use they, them pronouns, and I work for Michigan United as a Deep Canvas lead and overdose crisis organizer. And before I talk to you about how this project has changed me and the impact it has had on me and my community, I wanted to share a little bit about my personal story so you understood my stake in the work that I'm doing. So I'm originally from Puerto Rico. My father was Boricua, Puerto Rican, and my mom was German. And our life has been rather difficult, very intense. My family has always been lower class, poor working class family. And when I was around 6 years old, my mother developed cancer, and she was from Germany. She was an immigrant, and she didn't have the best health insurance. And because we were poor and working class, we weren't in a community where we had the best resources or even resources at all when it came to cancer, for example. And we would see all the time on the TV these ads for cancer research, but that was nowhere to be found in our communities. We would have to take a plane to go somewhere like that. So we tried the best we could. There was people in our community, doctors that were doing pro bono work that would help us out, but there was only so much they could do. And unfortunately, because of the resource disparity in our area, my mother unfortunately passed away from cancer because we couldn't find the resources for her in our area. And almost immediately after, my father developed really severe Alzheimer's and dementia. He was an older gentleman in his late 60s, and there was really nothing. We didn't have the right insurance. We didn't have the resources in our communities. We didn't even have a car to go to a doctor's office or to get groceries. And if it weren't for my community stepping up and taking care of me and my family, I don't know where I'd be today. When my father developed this and my mother had passed away, our neighbors would make food for us. They would bring us food. They would make me and my brothers our uniforms. They would help walk us to school. They would do everything they could to make sure that me and my family survived. And this would not have been possible if we didn't talk to our neighbors, and it wouldn't have been possible if we didn't have this sense of community and solidarity amongst ourselves. As Taina Asili said, organizaremos el pueblo como siempre. We'll organize our community forever, you know, because without our community, we're nothing. And if there will never be anything close to a revolution or even reform if we can't talk to our neighbors. We can't do this alone. If we can't convince our community, we can't convince the entire United States what needs to be done. And we really need to have our voices heard. Especially in this time of crisis. We're going through multiple pandemics at once, you know, whether it's COVID, unemployment, you know, this pandemic that we're going through. We really need to come together in solidarity and in unity so that our communities can thrive. Our voices need to be heard, because if we don't share our stories, people who aren't familiar with people like me, they're never going to know what our story is like. They'll never know what it's like to be an immigrant or a Latinx person or non-binary if we don't talk to them and share our stories. And we'll never know what their story is like if we never listen to them and we never let their voice be heard. So this project has really brought a lot of change to me. It's opened my eyes. It led to a lot of personal development. It's helped me with my own biases, and it's helped people we've spoken to with their own biases. And we're humanizing each other, and we want to make sure that we can come through this together, powerful, and to hold our elected officials accountable. And with that being said, I'm so happy that I was able to share this with you, and I'll pass it on to Bonnie.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Bonnie Dobson. I live in Mebane, North Carolina, and I'm a lead trainer with Down Home, North Carolina. I came to Deep Canvassing because last year, someone knocked on my door and asked me how I felt about immigration and healthcare. For the next 20 minutes or so, we talked and shared our lives like we were old friends. Now, I'm deep canvassing and having those conversations with voters across North Carolina, and I'm training other people to do the same thing. This election is the most important of my lifetime. I don't want to live in Trump's world. I don't want to raise my 3 amazing girls, Faith, Grace, and Ava, in Trump's world. The racial climate right now scares me. It doesn't feel safe for my family. Don't get me wrong, it's always been there. Those of us that are Black and brown, we know that intimately. But in Trump's world, it's in your face. The world has to change. This country has to change. I came to down home North Carolina at a real low point in my life. My kids were doing virtual school. My husband had lost his job. George Floyd had been murdered, and thousands of people were dying from coronavirus every day. I had lost hope. I didn't think anything could make a difference. And then I started talking to voters across my state. And more importantly, I listened to their stories. I talked to this one woman. Her name was Linda. She was 67. She obviously didn't know I was Black on the phone. So I got an opportunity to listen to how she felt about Black Lives Matter and systemic racism, almost like I was a fly on the wall. When I shared with Linda that I was Black and I shared my experience with racism, it was almost as if I could hear her softening right through the phone. In fact, at the end of that call, I knew I had changed her position on the Black experience, changed the way she thought about it. She was a staunch Trump supporter right from the beginning. At the end of the call, when I asked her about that, she said she wasn't sure. She said she had a lot to think about. That's the way it was for me, deep canvassing, call after call, connections with voters across my state. And I started to get hope. Deep canvassing gave me hope. It gave me a purpose. I urge you all to text WIN, W-I-N, to 79606 and get involved. We can all make a difference in a powerful and meaningful way. Back to you, Emily.
Wow, thank you so much, Bonnie, Steve, and MARIAELENA, for really bringing home the powerful impact that deep canvassing has had on each of you and the people you've talked with. Now, I'd like to introduce some volunteers to talk about their experiences, and they're going to ask our panelists to respond to their questions about deep canvassing. So first, I'd like to welcome SARAI HOFFMAN from Chicago. SARAI, over to you.
Hi, I'm SARAI HOFFMAN. I'm a volunteer from Chicago. I started deep canvassing about a month ago because I think our country is going in the wrong direction, and I needed to feel like I was doing something about it. You are all so very articulate, and you've had such powerful experiences. But as a volunteer, I found the hardest thing about phone banking is that it just doesn't feel polite to call up a stranger and start asking them questions about what they feel and believe. We're socialized not to ask personal questions of strangers, and that makes us nervous. When you started deep canvassing, how did you get past those feelings of nervousness and intrusiveness?
That's a great question. I can completely understand how uncomfortable it is calling strangers and asking them what they believe and how they feel about a certain thing. What I was trained to do and how I train others to get over that nervousness is to build a rapport right in the beginning of the conversation. Remember, you're inviting them in to discuss their feelings and their concerns and their fears surrounding this election. You want to make them feel comfortable and make it easy for them to share with you. So share a little bit about yourself. Use humor. Smile when you talk, you know. Don't be afraid of those awkward silences, because those can be your friend. In those silent moments, when there's little pauses, that gives the voter the opportunity to process your question and the space to kind of answer with what they're really feeling and what's on their heart. So I encourage you to just be curious, keep asking those questions, and make friends. That's what I did. One of the things that I didn't share in my story was, after I talked to Linda, she put her husband on the line. And her husband actually offered my husband a job. You can make some really deep connections by building a great rapport right in the beginning of your conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bonnie, and thank you, Sari, for the question. Next, I'd like to welcome Joel Mandelbaum from New York City. Joel, can you go ahead? Joel, we're going to need you to unmute yourself.
Hi, as Emily said, I'm Joel Mandelbaum. I live in New York City. I've been deep canvassing with People's Action for about a month. And in a deep canvassing conversation the other night, someone who voted for Trump in 2016 said he is glad Trump is keeping his campaign promises, such as building a border wall that actually has not been built. And he blamed Democrats for the divisiveness in the country. Nevertheless, this voter does not like Trump. At the same time, he does not trust Biden. How might you use deep canvassing to connect with voters who believe misinformation campaigns and move them away from their ambivalent support of Trump?
Yeah, Joel, thank you for that question. And the voter you're describing reminds me of one of the conversations I've gotten to have in this project that has stuck with me the most. So, in April, I talked to a woman in North Carolina, and she was very similar. She started out as a 2 on our 1 to 10 scale, with a 1 being like, I'm definitely voting for Trump. She was like, Trump needs to stay away from Twitter. I don't really like the guy, but I'm going to vote for him for sure. Because Biden and Obama and the Democrats and Nancy Pelosi and dividing our country and can't be trusted and all this stuff just poured out that, like you said, there was so much misinformation and just wrongness in it. And I was able to kind of hear all that and let her get it out, and then kind of just like put it on a shelf and not argue about it and not get sucked information. But instead, we just talked about our lives. And I shared about my brother, who's got really serious asthma. And because of that, took up a career of being a respiratory therapist to care for other people like him. And now during the pandemic is caring for COVID patients in the ER and ICU of his hospital in Michigan. And I shared about how deeply afraid I am about how much danger he's in, but also how proud of him I am. And she got quiet. And a little while later, she shared that her son had died in January. And that he had had a serious underlying lung condition. And he had started going to the ER asking for help, and doctors kept sending him home. And he ended up in the ER passing from this mysterious respiratory illness in January. And she just shared her grief with me and her hurt that he hadn't gotten the care he needed. And she wasn't sure whether it might have been an early COVID case or not. She thought it might have been, but couldn't get a straight answer from the doctors. And, once we had shared these things with each other, we weren't someone, we weren't like someone who believes that what the Democrats say on one side versus someone who believes what the Republicans say on the other side anymore. We were just 2 people living through something together. And at the end of that conversation, that gave us the ability, instead of debating the evidence and facts from Fox News versus my facts and evidence, we were just looking at the evidence from our own lives. And I was just able to say, like, look, for me, what this comes down to with my vote is that at the end of the day, when I see Joe Biden, I see someone who's lived through some of the things we're talking about, who grew up working class, who's lost people and struggled with health. And it just gives me hope that he could understand me and my brother and actually advocate for the things we need in a way that I just don't believe Trump can. And that's how I feel about it. And I was able to ask her how she felt about it. And just suddenly we were talking about conclusions from the evidence of our lives, not from all of that misinformation, all of that, all those debates and arguments that we're asked to have every day instead, which felt like the most, important thing we could have done at that moment.
Thank you. Wow, that's just a very powerful story you shared, Steve. And thanks so much, Joel, for that question. Finally, I'd like to welcome Rachel Gonzalez-Vernon from Oakland, California. Rachel, passing it over to you.
Thanks, Emily. So my name is Rachel. I'm Yaqui, Apache, Mexican, and white, and I grew up in rural Colorado. I grew up in a place where who I was not who everyone else was. And I think living in California, I've been very honored and excited to participate in the election with Seed the Vote, because I've been able to call folks in Arizona, rural Arizona, and talk with folks that have a similar story to the ones that I heard when I was growing up. And I think one of the things that's really struck me with deep canvassing is just how amazing it is to move past just the people, facts, and the, whatever we're trying to say, but into connecting with people over what's important to them and sharing our own stories and building relationships. I think one thing that is really striking me in this moment is, we're in a moment of deep isolation with COVID-19, where people can't connect with their friends, their family, the folks that keep them up. And I'm really wondering if one of you can share an example from deep canvassing in which you were really able to build on empathy and connection and build political power.
Yeah, thanks for your question, Rachel. So there have been a couple of examples actually of how we've shown to increase connection, build empathy, and build political power with the people we've spoken to. So a lot of the folks I've spoken to feel like they don't have a story, or they don't feel like their experience is valid. They feel like they're going through this alone. So when we call them and we talk to them with, as Bonnie mentioned, building this really good rapport, little hints of their story comes out, and we get to grab that hint of their story. So for example, I had someone talk to me, and they were not very engaging, and out of nowhere, she mentioned that her son was a postal service worker. And right then and there, I was like, okay, let's talk about this. Let's dig deeper into your son and his experience with the postal service right now. And through that, we were able to build this connection like on the working class level, and as an essential worker, we were able to build this political power because we both understood that the way that the USPS workers were being treated was wrong, and essential workers were being taken advantage of, and we're being put in this very isolated situation where we're all being told to be very individualistic. And after talking to her, she realized that her community was coming together. Then someone else, a neighbor, would pick it up and bring it in for her. Or her son started talking about, he was also in the room, he started talking about unionizing, even though they already have a union, and they were talking about how important it was for us to talk to each other so that we could be aware of what was going on. As I mentioned earlier, if we're not talking to our neighbors, we don't know what's going on. And that having these conversations and talking about everyone's little hints of their story really validates their experiences, and it makes them realize, like, I'm not going through this alone, and my story is powerful, and my story means something. And that is building political power, because we can take our stories and hold our elected officials accountable, hold our community accountable to what our experience is. And to me, that's really important in building political power, especially because we're building empathy with one another, we're humanizing each other, and we're making sure everyone's experience is validated. And yeah, I really appreciate the question. I'll pass it back on to Emily.
Thank you, MARIAELENA, and thank you, Rachel, for that question. Just want to give a deep appreciation for all of our volunteers, some of who might be listening to this town hall tonight, because you all are the ones making Deep Canvass possible, so we can defeat Trump. And again, you can join the movement to humanize each other, to bring empathy, compassion, and the values that have been lifted up in our conversation so far by simply texting the word WIN, W-I-N, to 79606 to join our Deep Canvass program. Now, I'm really excited to share that we have a special message from Senator Bernie Sanders to share with you all right now.
People's Action, thank you very much for inviting me to be with you. Most importantly, thank you for the extraordinary grassroots activism that you do every single day. And let me also thank Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, not only for the wonderful work she does in Washington, but for her remarks earlier today. Now, I'm going to keep what I say pretty short because I know you have a lot of work to do. But here is the good news, and that is that despite the hysterical opposition from the most dangerous president in American history, our agenda and our political revolution is gaining more and more support. Think for a second about the recent victories that we saw with Jamal Bowman with Mondaire Jones, with Cori Bush winning in major upsets congressional seats and on their way to Washington as strong progressives. Think about the landslide re-election victories of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, and Rashida Tlaib. Think about the countless progressives who are winning in state legislature races. Just the other day in Rhode Island, 8 progressives defeated incumbents. Seeing great change in Pennsylvania, California, New York State. We are making progress up and down the ballot. And how is this happening? Why are we seeing progressive movement going forward, winning victories at the ballot box? It's because of organizers like you. You are standing up and bringing people together around a multiracial, multi-generational movement for justice. You are rallying people around an agenda that says, you know what? We deserve dignity, and we're going to fight for it. We deserve just justice, economic justice, social justice, racial justice, environmental justice. And all that is happening because of the grassroots activism that we're seeing all across this country. And you, People's Action, should be extremely proud of the work that you have done and are doing right now. I don't need to tell anybody who is watching this how important this election is. It is not only the most important election in our lifetime, it is, in my view, the most important election in the modern history of this country, probably going back to the Civil War election of 1864. That's what this election is about. We are facing the worst public health crisis in 100 years. Over 190,000 people are dead from the pandemic. We're looking at the worst economic collapse since the Great Depression. We are confronting systemic racism and the enormous threat to our planet of climate change. We talk about climate change, turn on the TV. Take a look at what's going on right now in California, in Oregon, in Washington State. Hundreds of homes destroyed, people's life being lost. That's what climate change is doing. And in the midst of all of this, the systemic racism, the economic collapse, the pandemic, climate change, in the midst of all that, we have a president who is not only incapable of addressing these crises, but is leading us down the path toward authoritarianism. This is a president who does not believe in the Constitution of the United States, does not believe in the rule of law, does not believe in free elections. And it seems to me that in response to the unprecedented crises that we face, we need an unprecedented response. An unprecedented response. And that's what you are about. It's about creating a movement like we have never seen before, of working people, whether they're black or white, Latino, Native American, Asian American, of working people who are prepared to stand up and fight for democracy, fight for human dignity, and against the greed, the oligarchy, and the bigotry that is so prevalent in our country today. You at People's Action are building that movement right now. And I don't want to put too much pressure on you, but the stakes are pretty high. All that we're talking about, nothing more, is the future of our democracy, the future of our economy, the future of our healthcare system, and, oh, by the way, the future of the planet. Other than that, not much is at stake. So the bottom line here is that all of us must come together. We must defeat Donald Trump. We must elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as our next president and vice president. And I know not everybody is in agreement with everything that Biden stands for. Hey, that's me. I'm not in agreement with everything Biden stands for. But this is my pledge to you as a United States Senator. The day after we inaugurate Joe Biden, you and I and all of us are going to work together by the millions to demand that the United States government stands up for working people, has the courage to take on the corporate elite, and has the courage to create a nation and an economy that works for all of us, not just the few. So we've got a lot of work in front of us. Let's do it. Let's defeat Trump. Let's elect Biden. Let's transform this country. Congratulations on all that you're doing. I look forward to working with you.
Thank you so much to Senator Bernie Sanders. We thank you so much for bringing your spirit into this town hall. Next up, I'd like to bring up Brooke Adams, Director of Movement Governing at People's Action, who's going to explain exactly how you all can tap into the magic of deep canvassing. Over to you, Brooke.
Thank you so much, Emily, and to all of our amazing speakers leading up until now. As Mehrdad mentioned at the beginning of this call, the most important person on this call tonight is you. And we're going to spend the last 5 minutes or so of this call talking about exactly how you can get involved in our Deep Canvas program to make sure that we spend the next 49 days doing everything we can to beat Trump and heal this country in the process. So we're just 49 days away at this point from November 3rd. Let that sink in for a minute. 49 days. 49 days from the most important election of our lifetimes. And meanwhile, we're experiencing 3 crises in this country: a global pandemic, economic crisis, and police violence. And on top of that, climate change is ravaging our communities. Personally, I live in Seattle and have not been able to go outside for over a week now, and know it's like this for most of folks on the West Coast. And it's no accident that we're experiencing these crises. They're the direct result of living in a country where the powerful and wealthy have been prioritizing profit at the expense of our health and our planet. And it's not our fault that these crises are happening to us. But that being said, we do have a choice. Our choice is really simple. It's about whether we will spend the next 49 days doing every single thing we can to defeat Trump and heal our country, or whether we will face another 4 years of the continued destruction of our democracy, communities, and our planet. And the beauty of our Deep Canvas program, as many of our speakers have highlighted, is that it's not only about winning this election. We must do that. We absolutely must. It's also about building a movement through organizing, through meeting people where they're at, really listening, digging in, and making a pitch around what it would look like to live in a world where our government truly cares for all of us. Because this election is at its core about whether we're going to move forward together and build a multiracial working class democracy where all of us can thrive. Your commitment over the next 49 days, our commitment together, can tip the scales. I absolutely know it. So who is ready right now to commit to throwing down for the next 49? Let's see it in the chat. We've got a lot of really, really exciting opportunities that we're going to run through right now that we need everyone to sign up for so that we spend these next 49 days doing everything we can. So we're going to run through each of them right now. First off, you've heard this a few times tonight. The first thing we're asking everyone to do is text WIN, that is the word WIN, W-I-N, to 79606 to let us know that you are all in to beat Trump and heal America. This is going to sign you up to receive updates from us at People's Action. Again, text WIN to 79606 right now and let us know you are all in to win big this November. And the next thing that we are asking every single person to do here tonight is to join our Slack. If you are new to Slack, it's a really fun workspace that we use to stay updated on all of the different phone banks, text banks, and other events that we're running related to our Deep Canvas program. And you can join Slack right now by pulling out your phone or your computer and going to ppls.ac/join Slack. Again, that is ppls.ac/join Slack to join us. We've got a really great team of folks who help answer questions on Slack, and you're welcome to log in there at any time to get in touch with us. Again, that's ppls.ac/join Slack. And we also use the workspace to get to know each other and share different anecdotes. People told stories tonight about deep canvassing. Slack is a great place to share stories about who you are, what your experience has been like on the phones, and say hello. So the link one last time is ppls.ac/join Slack to join us on Slack tonight. And you can go ahead and pop on in there, go to the Welcome Start Here channel, introduce yourself, and say hello. And then finally, the most important thing that everyone can do tonight is to sign up to phone bank with us. With only 49 days to go, we are phone banking every single day of the week into our battleground states. And it's really, really easy to sign up. All you have to do is pull out your computer right now and go to ppls.ac/phonebank to sign up for one of our phone banks. During these phone banks, if you're new, we're going to be spending about an hour training you on our deep canvas methodology. Traditional canvassing, you get a script and you read it. Whereas with our deep canvases, we'll spend about an hour on the front end training you on how to ask open-ended questions, how to share stories, how to engage in conflict that people are feeling about the election. And we'll really dig in and give you all of the tools that you'll need in that front end hour-long training so that for the last 2 hours, you can focus on making calls with everything you need to be set up for success. So again, go to ppls.ac/phonebank to sign up right now. Never phone banked before? Don't worry, we will run through every single thing you need to know in these trainings. Again, it's ppls.ac/phonebank. And we are asking everyone to pick one state that you want to adopt now through Election Day and sign up for every single phone bank that day of the week. On Mondays, we have Wisconsin, Tuesdays, North Carolina, Wednesdays, New Hampshire, Thursdays, Michigan, Saturdays, we have Colorado and Pennsylvania, and Sundays, Arizona. Pick the one that you are most excited to throw down with and sign up for every single phone bank shift for the rest of the election cycle. Again, it's ppls.ac/phonebank. And it might be tempting to say, I'll just wait until later, I'll come back to it. But at this point, we've only got 49 days, so we need everyone to make a commitment to sign up here tonight with us at ppls.ac/phonebank to join us for a phone bank with your preferred state now through the election. So I'm going to pass it back to Emily in just one sec. Just want to remind everyone that we've got 3 asks for you tonight. Text WIN to 79606 to tell us you are all in. Go to ppls.ac/join Slack to join us on Slack. Go to ppls.ac/phonebank to sign up for our phone banks. And do want to let people know too, if you prefer to be sending text with us, we do have a really ambitious goal of sending millions of texts this month. So you can go to ppls.ac/TT, stands for Texting Tuesdays, ppls.ac/TT. If you prefer to sign up for Texting Tuesdays with us, where we'll train you on texting and you can start sending text with us around the presidential as well. Thank you so much. I will pass it back to Emily.
All right, thank you, Brooke, and thanks to all of our speakers for being part of the town hall tonight. We spoke for an hour, we did a lot of talking, we did a lot of thinking, and now it's time to act. So thanks to all of you who joined us across the country tonight. We estimate there were tens of thousands of people joining us tonight. Again, text WIN to 79606. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And while you're signing up for your shift, we have one final song from Taina to close us out. Go ahead, Taina.
Thank you so much. Yes, my name is Taina. Me. And this next song that we're going to share with you to close out is called Freedom. And it's a song that I wrote about ending mass incarceration and state violence, epidemics in our nation that have only gotten worse under the Trump administration. One of the many reasons that we need to defeat Trump by lifting up the power of the people and calling out for freedom. What do we want? Freedom! When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Freedom! When do we want it? Now! Freedom! 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 Prisons are freedom thieves, decimate communities, destroying our families, leaving no opportunity. Racial caste alive and well, now we're caught a criminal, and we're seen disposable. Millions stuck in America's hell, cannot eat the miss they fed. High contagion till you spend, say no money for children. Schools are pipeline to prison, discriminate legally, employment to vote housing, permanently lots of keys, stealing our humanity. We will oppose the lightning to strike into what we want, y'all. Come on. Yeah, freedom of the mind, freedom of the soul, freedom of the heart, and freedom, here we go. Battle for the lives of the folks that we know, battle for the seeds in the future that we sow, planting the seeds so we can see them grow. Let her crash live, life from death row, can't tame the spirit of the fire of the soul, breaking down the laws of the new Jim Crow. We will evolve the lightning, striking justice down. We will bring the thunder to break our family out. We'll evolve the lightning to strike injustice down. We will bring the thunder to break our family out. Freedom, 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 freedom. The free trial, freedom, the free trial, hey, yeah, yeah, hey. What do we want? Freedom. When do we want it? Now. Thank you all so much. Peace, love, and liberation. Let's keep the power of the people moving. Gracias.